Okay, I'm going to make a start then. So welcome everybody. This is going to be a great talk. It's called Accessibility Culture Eats WCAG, or Web Content Accessibility Guidelines Compliance for Breakfast. And it's going to be part of Services Week, which is an initiative from GDS. And I'm just trying to find my notes now. Got them. Okay, hold on a second. So I'll just introduce myself first. I'm Richard Morton, and I'm Head of Accessibility Government Digital Service, which is part of Cabinet Office. My role is to ensure that UK government services and information are accessible to as many people as possible, and to ensure that teams across government have the capability to achieve this. So I want to welcome you to our first cross-government accessibility meetup single talk event. We haven't done this before. We generally have meetups every 4 to 6 months. But we decided to make this a more open event, and as I say, part of Services Week. But I'm going to keep this brief because you've all come here to listen to and learn from Charlie and Gareth. So let's just give you a brief intro to what Services Week is about. It's part of Services Week 2021, which is a cross-organisational UK public sector event series. It's every year we do this, and it's a self-organised week of events to discuss good, accessible, equitable and sustainable public services. This year we've got 57 sessions happening, organised by 34 different organisations, and there's a link to the full agenda at bit.ly/SW21agenda. And it'd also be great if you share your thoughts and impressions around events on social media using the hashtag #ServicesWeek. And if you capitalise the first letter of services and week, that helps people using assistive technologies to understand that. Also, if you're on Slack, cross-government Slack, local government Slack, those sort of instances of Slack, you can check the Services Week channel. And we'd like if you be able to provide feedback as well on this session and Services Week generally at bit.ly/SW21feedback. So anyway, now the main feature. So grab your popcorn, turn off your mobile phones, sit back and enjoy hearing from Gareth Ford Williams and Charlie Turrell of the BBC. Thanks both. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Crikey, that's an intro.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. Popcorn at this time in the morning. I now want popcorn. Thank you. That's all my brain is telling me. Sounds like a great idea for breakfast. Hello, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. It's 2 ticks. Share the right thing. Where is it? There we go. Hopefully that is the correct slide deck. So hi everyone, I'm Gareth Ford Williams. Some of you may know me. I've been in the business for a little while around accessibility. It's over 15 years now. I set up the accessibility team at the BBC. And yeah, soon to leave. I think this, I'm not quite sure, this might be my last presentation as a BBC person, which is kind of a bit, yeah, it's kind of hit me this morning. It's like, oh, it's a bit sad. Charlie, over to you.
Yeah, and I'm Charlie Turrell, so I look after the Accessibility Champs Network. Joined the BBC a couple of years ago. Do you know what? It feels like a blur. It feels like forever, but also like I'm still brand new. But I joined your team in April last year, so I've had the pleasure of Gareth's company for a good year now.
Although we've hardly seen each other, but that's the same for everyone, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been an interesting year for everyone, I think. But so yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about I mean, obviously a slightly provocative title which we had a little bit of fun with, but we're going to talk a little bit about the approach of the BBC around accessibility and around our focus, which is culture is a very, very, very big part of the way that we manage accessibility. So I'm hoping, Charlie, can you see the slides?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's all fine, right? So if I'll crack on. So a little bit about the history, first about the BBC. So it was actually, you know, to get permissions to set up an accessibility team in 2005 was actually quite straightforward, because the BBC now has been doing various accessibility programs for nearly 80 years. So from in the 1940s, actually a piece of work with, you know, set up a charity as well around about the same time to look at accessible wireless is for the blind. through to doing the first ever InVision sign interpretation of a TV program in the 1950s, through to pioneering the first closed caption service in the 1970s on CFAX, pioneering AD along with ITV and a lot of other tech partners in the 90s, but actually building that as a production service. And then in, after 2000, obviously first accessible VOD service, first mobile accessibility guidelines. We've done stuff since, but the thing is, a point to make is we kind of, standing on the shoulders of giants. This was part of the makeup of the organization. And it just seemed to be like a logical thing to do. And it was literally a conversation between three people, me being one of them, and a comment of, why aren't we already doing this? So a little bit about, sort of the BBC and the way that it sort of wears its superhero outfit around this. It's a, being most British organisations, we're really rather polite about it. And actually, I didn't even know about half of this until after I'd started running the accessibility team. But it's one of those things where I just think, you in every organisation, you will actually find, you're not the first to be tackling accessibility. There is always a history, even though it may not be called accessibility necessarily. And with the BBC, actually, when I started digging around it, the reasons, why we do this thing is actually, it's not about the word accessibility or disability or anything like that. It's the word everyone, which is right the way through the BBC's history. We're there to inform, educate, and entertain everyone in the we're supposed to reflect in our makeup and our output and in our workforce, everyone in the UK, the diversity of the UK. And DGs have repeatedly said everyone, including the latest one in his first speech, and everyone has to have accessibility in it. If it doesn't have accessibility, then you're adding a caveat to everyone. It doesn't say everyone except them. And so, once you understand the language of your organization and that kind of superhero-ness of it, you start tapping into it. It might be in your pants drawer, but you need to go looking for it. It could be in policy or anyone. It's a very, very useful place to start. So we have a very small team, accessibility team, and currently it's the biggest it's ever been, at 7 people, which is kind of, still quite extraordinary, I think, for an organization the size we are. I think we're, as far as our audience is concerned, in the UK, we're as big as Facebook, and I think we've peaked at around 19 million unique browsers a week this year. Roughly 500 million, actually it's gone over 500 million internationally, 44 languages supported, lots of multiple platforms, hugely complicated organization. We were talking with Richard about this before. We've got commercial enterprises, public service enterprises, charities, all sorts. It may have one brand, but it's hugely complicated. And there's 7 people managing accessibility across it. And it's, we do 3 things as a team. So we build resources. So I'm always rather clear about my opinions of WCAG. WCAG is a very, very useful tool. It's not really an answer to anything, but it's a very, very useful thing to help you find answers. It's ironically possibly one of the most unusable things on the planet, and create enormous amounts of friction, and is problematic in itself, but it's full of great knowledge and information. It's also a work in progress. It's not got all the answers, and it's also agnostic, so it tries to have all the answers for everyone. So what we try and do is we take things like WCAG and other resources, and we try and build our own resources off the back of these that are more useful and fit in with the way that we do things at the BBC and answer the questions we need to answer. We try not to make those the first port of call. We try and then make everything to do with training should be the first part. Things you learn about this, and then you go back to the resources. And so we focus on that. And actually the main, and the point of this talk is the way that then this is embedded within our business as usual is through our Champions Network, which in name is now it's over 8 years old. But actually, in fact, it's actually been around since 2006. We have a design system, and everyone has a design system these days, and we're very, very heavily involved in that because we actually sit in UX and D. So we make sure that everything in the design system can be built accessibly. And there's a very important point in it. It can be built. We don't have a library of code. We don't build it that way. We don't say, exactly, the way that this needs to be interpreted, but we know everything in there is possible because we've been working with it. And we also build UX resources in there that give UXers things, reference points, what they need. So how-to guides. We then take everything, all of the stuff that we have found that is useful and meaningful to us, and we have our own accessibility guidelines. We've had these again since 2006, and we built them from the ground up. Literally, there was a meeting one day where a bunch of us got together across all of the different product areas and simply made the decision of how many heading level 1s we should have on every page. Because that was actually a very pertinent question at the time, because it was not uniform in any way. We had many. And then the next meeting, we decided what they would do. And we literally did it question by question and built up a picture. And now most of what's in here is just done as part of business as usual. And very few people, use these directly, but they're a really, really useful foundation for everything that we do and to go back to. The way that we do that is we extrapolate stuff. So everyone's building everything as components these days, lots and lots and lots of component libraries, Gel's full of components. And so we have a mirror of Gel technical documents, which is a guide to how to build every single component accessibly. I could do a presentation just on this, love to do it in the future, but we have this component driven approach to documentation. So this, again, it's got code in it, it's got tests in it, it's all sorts of things, but it's the way that it determines the way that people build code libraries. So if you have a code repository and you're using Gel, which you should be using, and then this will tell you what good looks like, how your code should behave. We don't say what your code should be built out of, and we use many frameworks for many different reasons for many audiences, but they all should uniformly behave in the same way. We also have a function within the team that 3 of the members of the team look after a lot of the things like the resources, but they're actually research engineers. They have an R&D function. And so what we kind of do is usually within the organization is ask sort of what it is that we don't know quite regularly, and what it is that the industry also doesn't know. One of the most difficult things to deal with in any organization is someone or a process where they or it does not know what it doesn't know. And so we have programs of work where, and this is in reference to one that Jamie Knight has been working on for the last couple of years, where literally we don't know anything about XR accessibility, and every time we looked out there and looked for data on this, we couldn't find any. There's a lot of people with some great hypotheses and ideas, but nothing that it's based on. No one has actually done the work to actually understand the barriers. And so sometimes it's worth that. We have that program of work is understanding the barriers before we start making decisions. And then all of that gets then pulled into, resources like, our training resource on BBC Academy. And that's that kind of first port of call where, once we know things, we that's that place where people can go to, and we run all sorts of different training courses for different groups of users. And they're for us, the users are our internal teams, to actually understand what needs to be done. And then, for myself, I'm absolutely a massive policy nerd. For someone who's dyslexic and ADHD, to really get into policy is kind of a bit like punching yourself in the face for fun. But I totally value policy. This is actually, we've just published our latest digital product accessibility policy. And it's really, really important, because every time we find out how to do something, and we know we can do it, and we've proven that we've done it multiple times, we turn it into policy. So when it becomes policy, it becomes the way that we always have to do it. It becomes our minimum benchmark. And everything in there is not just doable, it's already being done. This stops the organization from ever going backwards and undermining itself. Quickly onto the accessibility. So back in 2000, actually it was 2011, this was a photograph taken in 2012 when we had an accessibility team of literally 3 people. By the way, Jakob Nielsen there in the background and Bruce Lawson were not part of that team. That was just a team photograph on an away day, and Bruce put that up on Twitter and we added to it. So myself, Henny Swan and Ian Pouncey were talking a lot about the way that we're going to do stuff and scale it. And literally a chap came along that many of you will have heard of called Al Duggan. And Al had been part of the original accessibility group back in 2006, helping us build the HTML guide and a lot of the accessibility guidance. And Al came along and just said, look, he's taken this role as principal dev lead for the 2012 Olympics. And he said, I want to know everything now. I want to completely embed accessibility into everything we're doing. And so Henny and Al became a team. And we trained Al up and supported him and everything, and supported his team, and got really, I mean, obviously it was a big deal. And then we just thought ourselves, how many more Al's are there? And that's when we decided in 2012 to set up the Accessibility Champions Network. There are many Al's, as we've discovered. These are some of the current Al's that we have now. I think, Charlie, we've got over 200 members at the minute, haven't we?
220 so far.
Yeah. And do you want to say a little bit about what they do?
Yeah, so the champs are all across the wider organization. We generally focus on design engineering as our kind of key group of people, but they are across BBC Studios, even in HR and in internal communications. So what these champions do, that generally are the voice of a project. So they'll either be the ones with the knowledge, or even just be able to put their hand up and go, have we thought about accessibility when we start in this project? So they're spread out pretty much everywhere, and they're my eyes and ears as well.
This is very much, I think, a public service model around of it. It's we're bringing people in, and it becomes, everyone has come to us because they want to, and they're curious. And we have always from the beginning. I mean, it literally started out by me sending an email around the division when we were pretty much all based in West 12 at the time, so it was quite easy to do. And I'd booked a boardroom, and I'd got some free sandwiches and tea.
Right, everybody.
Yeah, and said, rock up, either you're interested in accessibility or you feel sorry for me because I've got no friends to have lunch with, and and whatever, come along. And it was packed, that boardroom, of people who were curious and didn't know a great deal about it, many of them, and some of them knew a lot about it. And that's how we suddenly realized we've got a network here. We just need to find a way of managing it. So over the years, 6 managers, and I'm going to make sure that I include Mr. Lyon in there. So Henny and Ian originally running the network. Jamie and Lyon joined my team, and you may know Jamie Knight. If not, do look him up. He's a phenomenal speaker. Lots of great stuff around cognitive accessibility. Jamie took over the network, then Emma, and then the thing is, all 4 of them are practitioners, and Mr. Lyon, I suppose, could be a practitioner. I've never asked him. And then we decided that there was something that was missing from this whole thing. It was working well, but it should be working in a different sort of well. There was something missing, and I changed my focus to suddenly deciding that actually this is a change management problem. It's not just about expertise. It literally is about cultural change. And Charlie joined the team as a change manager.
Yeah. Really hard left there, wasn't it? Like somebody with no technical knowledge, and you thought, great person. Well, as Gareth was saying, fantastic introduction. I took over the Champs Network early last year. It felt April, just as the world fell into chaos, but we now have over 220 accessibility champions across the BBC, all passionate about embedding accessibility into their work on a daily basis, which is great. And I think it really is important to have a good understanding of how you work and how you design, how the code you write has this direct impact on people. And we do tend to promote that within our network and obviously show other people. We've got to focus on internally in your organization, but also thinking about what your external audience is. So if you see these barriers that you can create when making decisions, or the barriers that you can actually take down as a direct consequence, of your ideas and actions, help you develop as a good accessibility champion. So I think there is a need for every organization to understand that their approach in this designing and building is genuinely a difference between disabling and enabling their users. So for this to happen, me and Gareth talked about it extensively, and I think we went from a shift of a compliance mindset, which was obviously very early on, to this embedded model of accessibility on a more human-focused culture. And we tried not to do any box ticking. So we've got such a small team. Obviously, we've only got 7 people throughout the entire of the BBC. So how can this team really nurture this strong culture in a wider network? How can we develop champions? How can we foster this collaborative spirit? And how can we strengthen these, their skills as such a small team? So to ensure it kind of continues to work, we moved away from that auditing model to this wider accessibility mentality and a culture across the business. I think auditing can be something that if we rely on, we can become really complacent. So I think we can stop us drifting into that compliance world. We constantly talk about culture and this human focused mindset, making it more focused on our work ethic and everything that we do, having these constant conversations in any design or sprint that we do, or even meeting that we have. I think dropping back into compliance isn't an answer to any other question than is what I'm building compliant. Next slide, Gareth. Thank you. So when I joined the team, I really wanted to focus on this culture and develop the way that we interact with each other and consume information. And I think that was really key in the last 12 months, especially when I first joined the team, because things were changing so much that people did feel uncomfortable about it. And people, it was an entirely new world that we were going into, and the way that we were interacting each other was changing. So it was almost a good way of getting into this different change model. The way that we support each other, we've seen innovative solutions to many problems caused by the pandemic. So our whole working life and environment was just flipped upside down. So making sure that I was flexible in the way that I run the network was really key to keeping people involved and really active. So we don't really recruit into the Champions Network at all. How do we get to this point without that recruitment? The members of the network generally tend to come to us. We promote in some channels internally for visibility, but the BBC is so big that word of mouth only goes so far. But many have seen the good work that a champ has done in a particular project, and then they reach out to me or my team and say, this is something that I also want to get involved in. I think me and Gareth spoke quite extensively about recruitment, and there are problems that come from that. I think if you're actively recruiting a champion into a specific network, they do expect some kind of structure. So I think for us to have that fluidity was really helpful. Next slide, please, Gareth. So as a champions manager, I constantly want to check, is it working? Do we need to have any more structure? Are we hearing the champs' voices in the products? Are we having these active communications and conversations on Slack and Teams and email? Do we need to change anything in the training? One of the questions I also asked, are we missing any training that the champs are creating? Because we were speaking about this earlier, weren't we, Gareth, about the fact that it's full of gold on the ground working, where a lot of the innovation happens. The champs have actually created these training modules or these documents to be able to spread about throughout the rest of the champs network that really works for them. I think it's a never ending, evolving network. So being structured for us doesn't necessarily work. We try not to dictate the culture of the network, and we're learning from them. I'm mainly the enabler of it. The champion tends to be the voice and the go-to person in every product and every design sprint and every meeting. So the support that each person needs can vary, and having such a fluid network helps me look after it better rather than having a huge influx of people expecting something quite structured. So I think with any network, it's really vital to adapt and make sure that we can accommodate changing needs of the organization, but also respond to the diversity and the needs of people that are a part of it. So when I first started and came into the team, the things that I was asking is what does and doesn't work. So right at the very beginning, I decided to do a big kind of audit of the group to find out if there's anything that they particularly liked about the network, if there's anything that they wanted improving. If I wanted to ask as much negative feedback as possible, because that was the way that I can help see where those gaps are. Are people staying actively engaged? We used to have meetups quite regularly, and obviously that all stopped at the very beginning of last year. So we had to change the way that we got people involved in the network. And do the champions feel that they're actually part of something bigger? So when I induct a champion, it's quite a casual conversation, really, to get to know them as people. So I ask, what do they already know? What their interest regarding accessibility? Do they have any gaps in their knowledge? A lot of the time, people, like Gareth said earlier, they don't know what they don't know. So being able to have that casual conversation and talk about neurodiversity, screen readers, various other different kind of caveats in the accessibility world was really helpful to find out what I could train them in the future. I wanted to know where they've come from previously, what training they've had there, and what brought you to the network in the first place. As a champions manager, understanding that person's motivation was really vital for me to support in the right way. And I think if we take the time to get to understand that, we can encourage people and tailor our training to suit the individual. So I think being a horizontal soft network in an organisation that's full of verticals with different product cultures isn't without its challenges. So the culture in our sports team is vastly different to one in our CBeebies team, down to the pace, the way of working, the relationship with the audience, because it's massively different. So we even have internal teams that interact in an entirely different way because their audience is us, the staff members. So we have to be aware that there are these different cultures, and one shoe won't fit all when it comes down to training. So I think knowledge has to be, next slide, Gareth. Knowledge has to be retained in an organisation and grown. So if your accessibility person leaves, and then there is an immediate gap if that knowledge isn't spread through the community. So I think a network means there's lots of people collaborating, there's lots of people sharing knowledge, we share information, we share tips constantly. If someone leaves or changes department, that knowledge is then held within the group because everyone's having that constant conversation. So we also don't want to overwhelm people when they join. It is a slow process, and I try and keep it slow and steady throughout the time that they're learning, because I don't want people to start off all enthusiastic and join the network and then be overwhelmed with the breadth of the subject or the jargon that we use. When I entered the accessibility world at the beginning of last year, I did feel engulfed with different acronyms and language that I'd never come across before. And it can feel quite overwhelming and feel like there's almost too much to learn because there's so many different ways that we can go about things. So champs might also feel the same way, especially if they just want to be the voice in a project rather than the particularly technical. And I think in the accessibility team, we've got this second change manager, which is a great support because she focuses on skills development and very specific training. So she is the one that runs the BBC Academy side of things, and also talks to a lot of the champs that are developing their own training and formalizes it. So it's a benefit to everybody in various different departments, because we've got to think that the champs, they're the stimulus. They're sometimes just the ones that are asking the questions, and they're not always the ones that are delivering the project. Sometimes they're the ones just making sure it happens and being that voice rather than the ones that are actually on the ground doing it.
Yeah, some of those workshops that get developed, we come across these every now and again, and people run little workshops and little presentations and show and tells and all sorts of different things. And sometimes there's real gold, and they pick up stuff and we go, actually, is there a wider need? And Charlie picks these things up and has done a marvelous job of getting conversations. I think around knowledge, Charlie, I think sometimes it's that role that you play is almost like a dating agent between, different groups and the things that they know and what can be useful between them.
Yeah, linking people up. Sometimes I'll be having a conversation with someone about accessible maps, for instance, and I'll be linking them up with potentially external people that are also working on that. Or I've heard about that in another team where we're having a little catch up and they're talking about accessible maps. And so it's really helpful to go, actually, you're working on these two things. Should we create a working group from that? And that might happen over a period of time, but that might develop, or that might just be a little support network so they've got a place to ask questions. So the champions are quite a pick and mix group, and we are from very different disciplines. And I think we can see them supporting each other and collaborating on these ideas. They stretch into even new product features. So accessibility almost becomes this part of the product's evolution. You can see if someone's thought about accessibility right from the very beginning. So we as an accessibility team just contribute to that network, and we are quite a pick and mix group. So we act as consultants and trainers and peers, and again, subject dating agents. And I think our background makes us quite strong as a team. Some are recovering developers, some have worked as creatives, and we've got project managers, we've got people management, and we all have various different knowledge in different areas, and we're incredibly neurodiverse too. And at the same time, everyone's on their own journey. Their knowledge framework comes from the BBC, but they do pick and choose what they want to learn about. And I genuinely encourage that, because I want to balance the knowledge and the individual's journey as well. So the champions, they do need to stay motivated. And for me, this has been a huge problem over the last year, especially the fact that everybody doesn't feel particularly motivated in general. The pandemic has really thrown people off. And I think, we have to be mindful that I think people need to be credited and have their work celebrated. That's a good start to get people to feel encouraged to see other people actually embedding accessibility into their work. So if a lobby group gives great feedback, then the people who did the work actually need to hear it. We try and think about this in layers. So we try and support the individual and then support the team around them. That then feeds into the network that we're supporting and then feeds out into the organization. And ultimately the benefit for that is the audience. So we really do need to get that motivation right. I think if we build and develop the individual and share that with the larger group, that group then retains the knowledge. This doesn't happen when you've done lots of compliance. I feel that it happens with celebration and achievement and constant conversation. So we also provide lots of channels of support. So we have our Slack channel, we have our workshops, we have newsletters, we're developing an intranet page for the champs. And I think we also have accessibility, a website that's gone live that Jamie's built, haven't we, Gareth? That's gone live recently.
Yeah, that's gone. Yeah, so there's an intranet site that you've been involved in. But yeah, Jamie's been working on some stuff, some more stuff around that's more audience focused around all the accessibility help, but it points you to all of the resources at the BBC. Yeah.
So constantly asking the champions to give their feedback, I find, is really important as well. I think we need to make it a real two-way conversation. I'm not just delivering this information, I'm asking them constantly for their feedback, and we shouldn't be afraid of that negative feedback. That should be a way for us to be able to grow a little bit further and fill in those gaps that we really need to. So I think I want them to feel supported. I want them to feel that they're belonging to something bigger. And I want to know what they want to get out of the network in the end of it as well. It's their network. We have to listen to them and provide the right balance of support, mentoring and opportunities.
I think one of the points that you've made before was really important, Charlie, and it was all about that whole celebration and feedback. And one of the things that regularly, we've realized over the years is that the best compliment that you can have from your audience is silence. Very, very few people will ever contact you and say, thank you very much for making your site accessible. That doesn't happen because they just want to get on and do the thing that the site is about. But if suddenly, we've seen it over the years, the complaints just disappear. We used to be dealing with what we are dealing with in a year, we used to deal with in a week. And, that's silence. And that is actually the best compliment you can ever get from your audience.
Definitely. I think the silence is gold. I think when nothing's on fire, then you've done a good job, basically. Yeah. And I think we use that as our kind of a way to know if we are actually doing the right thing. And the feedback's great because it just helps us go in whatever direction that we're needed to. Having that open conversation is really important to keep things fresh and new. Yeah. Some of the champs are so good at what they do, they're actually leaders in their areas. So you've got Sophie, who works in BBC Web Corp. You've got Catherine, who works as an accessibility lead in News World Service, and you've got Andy, that is in BBC Sounds. So these champions grow and they develop and they work on their particular areas, and they find various different accessibility solutions, and they create different training, and they feed back into this wider group. I do rely on Sophie and Catherine to be able to understand what's happening in their areas, and they create some of the most wonderful training resources that I've then shared across with everybody, that we're now formalized a little bit more with. Becky's done that, who's our accessibility training lead. So the champions leads are the coal faces, and they're our clients. So these long-serving champions, they've got recognized expertise, and it's only because it's part of their job and mindset, and they're developing people who are now specialists in the organization as well. So the training documents that Sophie's created recently have been fabulous, and we've shared them, and now we're going to be doing a workshop around it. So having those conversations with the champions, really, you get some key resources that come out of that. So there's, next slide, Gareth. There's a huge diversity within the network. And as we all know, diversity only can make things better. So we've got different perspectives and different superpowers from our champs, and they challenge the organization by feeding back on the support that they've given. So they help us to spot barriers, they help us to spot opportunities, and it means the network almost takes on this bigger than itself vibe. it's not just bigger in terms of the BBC, but I think it also feeds into the wider accessibility community. These champs, you know, they go off into different environments, the different worlds, different jobs, and they take that accessibility knowledge with them. So I think
we've got quite an alumni, haven't we now? It's
yeah,
obviously Al being the first one.
Of course, yeah. But a lot of them, you know, they'll interact with me after they've left the BBC after a couple of years, going, "Oh, that resource was great, and actually I've taken this idea of champions and I've embedded it into my team, or I'm doing, you know, workshops that are similar, or I've heard a talk and I've took Jamie's idea and I've gone and I've run with it." And it's great to be able to see that, because what we're doing is we're feeding into this community, and then it's going out wider, and it can only be beneficial.
Yeah, a lot of them, they've left the BBC and it's become their career as well, which is just absolutely brilliant. And they're taking this into other organizations. So that's always wonderful to see.
Yeah. So I think the accessibility team are the enablers. So it's our, next slide, Gareth. It's our responsibility to make sure the champions have the resources they need, the support when they need it, and a really open mind when we're asking questions. I think that's the key one, the no silly questions. I think to make people feel comfortable, we want to make sure that people feel that they can ask any questions that they want, and it won't be met with, "Oh, you should be already knowing this, you should be already embedding this into your work." It's okay to start from the beginning and just to ask those questions. So as a group, we try and keep cross-pollinating ideas through all these different channels, and the champions come up with ideas and approaches that have been adopted by various different teams. So, you know, I think it's a great tool to have that, to be able to share and ask for help, and it really creates a sense of community, I feel, and allows you to see what your champions are actually working on. I think these channels almost give me a bird's eye view to be able to see if there's any particular problem or question that we don't feel like we're answering as a team. If we see people promoting their work, is that something that we can share with the rest of the BBC? Is it something that we can do an article on, or a talk on, and take it to the wider community? So having that view and having to see those conversations is really helpful.
So
yeah.
Did I go on too quickly?
No, this is you.
So this is one of those things that we we kind of realized, I mean, way early, I mean, years and years and years ago, was one of the things that we never wanted, you know, accessibility to be, is, you know, it's not a dark art, it's not magic. You know, it's something that, you know, it's not, you know, some enormous amount of compliance, or it's not about auditing people rocking up and telling you, you know, how you're doing your job wrong.
Yeah.
And it's about the way that we do things. I mean, I think Charlie's already mentioned doing an audit, but she did an audit to learn, which is what I always think audits are useful for. Do an audit on naming conventions or something like that, labeling conventions. Don't do it as part of your process at the end of the process, because it's kind of pointless by the time you get there, because you're never going to get around to fixing the stuff before it goes live. And so we always have this kind of don't break it in the first place. And it's this kind of empowering, it's in a kind of empowering role, I suppose, what it is. But I mean, one of the interesting things around accessibility is when you think about it, you're not actually, accessibility isn't a thing that you deliver. You know, because all the barriers to accessibility are ones that, you know, we've created. So before you start building anything, there are no barriers. Before you design anything, there are no barriers. And every decision that you make in that process, you will either create barriers, or you'll create no barriers. And so then further down the line, you realize that you've made the wrong decisions design wise or technically, and have to go back and fix it. So if you make the right decisions early on, and you impart, you know, give people the knowledge and the support, and allow people to fail, but we all learn from it, and we look at it and we evaluate it and build that skill and that knowledge, then we stop having to rely on trying to fix the things that we've actually actively broken. So, you know, when anyone asks about, Richard was asking earlier about, you know, that kind of minimum, what do we need to do? What's the minimum benchmark? My minimum benchmark is stop breaking things. You know, stop building stuff that's broken so we have to fix it. That's the minimum.
Oh, there we go. Didn't realize you changed the slide then. So we have to constantly go through changes, and I think that's a really key part about this network. It's okay for things to change. I think, you know, the way that it was working, there was nothing necessarily wrong with it. You know, we're quite technical, and Emma, who was the previous Champs Network manager, did a wonderful job in making sure we've got all the resources that we need. And I think the change just comes from making sure that it's a big part of your mindset. I think that's what it is. You need to make sure that you're constantly thinking about it, and the culture of a network, especially when we want it to grow and also feed into everywhere else across the BBC. Having those conversations sometimes are the most important. So, you know, we go through changes, there's external changes all the time, staff change, you know, the BBC is going through a massive overhaul at the minute. So we don't want to lose any of that intrinsic value. So supporting this network and keeping the information flowing all the time is a way to keep that culture going. I think by focus on culture as an approach, by acknowledging that culture can't necessarily be dictated, but it has to be encouraged to grow. I don't go into the network and go, like, this is the culture and we're all going to be a part of it. I have to watch and see the different cultures in various different areas and encourage them and make sure that they've got everything that they need to continue going down that road as well. I think you can strengthen a community not by taking it apart and going, I think this is the way that you should be doing it, but by seeing actually how they're doing it and reinforcing that and keeping it, making sure it's open.
So everything we've said so far is the way that the BBC has tackled this, and it's very much, it's like every one of our resources, you know, use BBC Jail if you want to build things that look like BBC, you know, and use our resources if you want things to behave like the BBC. You know, everyone has their own kind of take on this, and there are other organizations with Champions Networks, Barclays, Microsoft, Google, Intuit, many more that we've come across quite, you know, over the last couple of years, and we're in touch with all these organizations because we feel that, you know, they're taking very, very, very different approaches. Some of them, like Intuit, is very much front-end developer and very much focused on training and knowledge and building it from a very much an engineering perspective first. But that is absolutely right for the way their organization works. That's just fitting and being, again, Ted Drake, who runs that network and is the head of accessibility in Intuit, is very, very mindful of the culture of his own organization. And Google have done one where I think they've built the whole thing around Kung Fu belts. You know, Microsoft is more of a, you know, it's more to do sort of with it's sort of a disability network. So it's combining, it's to do with conversations between users and employees and all sorts of stuff. And there's a different approach around there around conversation. And so you'll find, you know, understanding what your own organization needs are to draw on from what other networks are doing and add your own stuff to it, add your own twists and build on it. You know, and we're not saying that the BBC way is the way, but so far it's worked fairly well for us as an organization that is not, you know, sort of is as a public service organization.
I think we've almost listened to the way that the BBC behaves and notice those different cultures, and we've noticed those different groups, and instead of gone, right, one shoe fits all, it's fine, we've kind of gone, okay, so, you know, maybe a bit of the Google way of thinking of things would work for BBC Studios, and maybe, you know, being a little bit more fluid in the user experience and design team work because everybody thinks in a different way or works in a different way. So listening to those groups and kind of making sure that you're understanding those cultures and encouraging them, you know, it doesn't split everybody up, it just makes it really diverse.
Yeah, I mean, we learn constantly from external organizations and we're always looking for new ideas. I mean, we learn from gov.uk on forms, you know, because we practically only have 3 forms at the BBC, which is login so yeah, signing up and logging in and complaints and search. That's it. That's pretty much all our forms. And yet, you know, in gov.uk, you guys have pretty much everything's a form in some way, means or form. There's tons of forms everywhere. And so we look at you know, go, right, okay, when we need to do this, we need to engage and really learn from the organizations. They're expert on this. Barclays being a bank, Intuit, you know, they know forms. And so we're constantly drawing on this information and trying to pull it back in to our own learning.
I think that's a good point, actually, because I've been talking to lots of external organizations since I've started, because I thought, you know, there's an approach that we have and that's wonderful, that does work for us, there's no problems with that, but having these conversations with various different champs managers in different areas, even people that are just starting off and creating their network and have gone, oh, I've noticed these problems, or I've developed this thing that seems to really work to get everybody on board, I find that really helpful. And having those conversations and going, oh, I'll pick that seems to work for us as a culture and that works, and creating something yourself rather than kind of shoehorning somebody else's culture and network focus into what you're already doing.
So we're close to wrapping up now.
Yeah, I promise we'll shut up. But we do have a couple of recommendations, I think, to number one, build a network based on people who are already sold on the idea with any level of skill, and say, you know, there's no minimum. You know, you're welcome to come along and just be the person that asks the question in the room and then leave everybody else to it. That's still okay, but it's just get people on board that are already happy to be there. Ensure the champions realize that they're the voice of the user and not just responsible for delivery. Train them. So the first point of contact should be training, and this should be in manageable chunks, tailored to their role and tailored to who they are as a person, how they like to learn. Translate WCAG and user needs into things that are usable. So design library components, technical documentation, research methodologies. Have additional resources and information about articles and events like this that they can attend or speak at. It's a development opportunity for every network member. Provide communication channels such as Slack, Teams, distribution lists, etc. Talk to them, build up an existing culture within their respective product teams and support that culture, and definitely celebrate their successes with them. Make sure that it is recognized by the organization and show them what good accessibility can look like. So we're almost done. We know the job's never done, and we need to keep sustaining it and adapting it and develop it. And we want to nurture people to just have a go. You know, just start with accessibility, start learning things, just see how you can embed it into your work. If it goes wrong, you've got a group there that can support you with that. But we just want people to start thinking about it and having those conversations. And I think that's when projects do become more accessible naturally. So, you know, we're at a point in our journey where we're still learning, and we might be changing the culture. And as everything kind of changes in the future, we'll have to change with it. But there's still a lot to learn. But everybody will have their own different problems, and it's in your hands to fix those problems in your organization, to be able to understand what it is that they need. So, and
it is a journey. I mean, I know it's a hackneyed response, we hear that a lot, but it is a journey, and it's evolution, you know. And this is after 15 years. This is where we've got, you know, and
it's massively from the beginning, isn't it, really?
Oh yeah. And the wheels have come off at various different points, and other things we've been really surprised about, the things that have gone well. And that's that whole thing, is the kind of embracing that change and being constantly being ready to accept that you might be wrong and there's a better way of doing it. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I stop sharing the screen.
Both. There's a number of questions come up in the chat. I'll kick you off with one if you like. Got a question. This is from Sarah. Got a question about the Champions Network. How many of the Champions team have accessibility issues?
So, as in disabilities or accessibility issues in their work?
I'm guessing they're talking about disabilities or accessibility needs. Yeah.
Gareth, you could probably answer half that as well.
I actually, we've never, I mean, we have assistive technology users within the group, and that's fine. I mean, one of the things we try and not discourage is saying, you know, if there is a member of the team who's a screen reader user or a JAWS user, a Dragon user or anything like that, is don't ask them to check your homework. And it's the same with other members of staff. They've got jobs to do. They're doing their job. Ask a bit of advice, have a chat, whatever, be interested, but don't try and use them as a testing resource. Because, you know, they need to finish at the end of the day like the rest of us.
And so there are support channels for that. You know, a lot of the research that we've done are based on, you know, user feedback, so you don't have to ask those members of your team. I think our team's massively neurodiverse and diverse anyway, and so is the assistive tech team. So we do have experts on those teams anyway. So I think with the Champions, I think it's massively diverse. We've got people with disabilities and people that are just interested to have those conversations.
Yeah, and also people will bring all sorts of different knowledge, because obviously loads of different people use the same assistive technology in different ways. And so having that diversity in the network, it gives us a really good conversation to be had, because people will add to our knowledge as a team, because they're, you know, someone who uses screen reader every day is an expert user, and they can give you certain types of insights, but you then need to listen to many expert users to get that variant across those opinions.
Great. Next one is, how do you make sure you have accessibility champions spread in all areas of the organization?
I think for me, well, I've been looking about this recently because I've got a couple of areas where I find that there's not an awful lot of champs there, and trying to wonder why. And sometimes it's my method of delivery. So I tend to be quite fluid. I have these really, kind of easy conversations when I'm onboarding people. It's more of a chat. And then actually there's some areas where they want the structure, they want a step-by-step process and a to-do list, and so I have to understand that there's different ways of working. So I go into those groups and kind of go, I'll do a bit of a presentation of this is what the champs do, and this is some examples of good work, and this is what can happen if you're really not thinking about that at the beginning, and have a very open, my door's open, please come and have a conversation with me. And that seems to work, rather than going, this is an additional part of your role. Everybody feels quite overwhelmed, and I think sometimes people get in the mindset of accessibility is all this extra work, or this is extra stuff to do, and kind of showing them to go, actually now you don't have to redesign something because it already works for you, because you've had a little bit of training at the beginning. So you've got a bit of extra time, and kind of showing people what benefits there are. People generally tend to come for you to different areas, but sometimes it is about your method of delivery, or even just making sure that you get the word of mouth out there and show people.
Yeah, it's been interesting over the years. I mean, sometimes we do have that sort of moment because people move around, and that's fine. Yeah, and sometimes you are mindful about that. And we do have a list, and we know we have a page, and we know who everyone is and where they are, and so we've had funny moments where literally teams have cropped up, and every single member of the team has been an accessibility champion, just simply because they've moved in there. That's fine. So we've had a business analysts, we've had QA testers, and they've all been talking about it, which we know that this is not going to go wrong, or at least, and we know we're going to have really good conversations with them. And then other places where literally it's just a different mix. And then sometimes it's interesting because then, we get the management coming to us going, we're not being involved in the conversation, and we want someone in my team, and they'll do a bit of a push, and you just have to wing it. It's one of those, we want everyone who wants to be able to be involved.
Yeah,
and that's the point of it.
Well, if there is a gap there, almost linking people up a little bit seems to work as well. I've done that a couple of times because some people have come just with questions, and I kind of go, oh, let's have a look at your area, and I'll kind of show you your accessibility champ that's nearest to you, whatever product you're in or whatever team you're in. And if there isn't anybody, it's nice to put that question out there and go, has anyone got some answers to this particular thing? They can see the answers starting to come through from various different champs on whatever channel it is that I've used, and they kind of go, oh, I didn't realize that knowledge was available for people. And people then start to feed into these different areas.
Before they know it, they're a champ.
They're a champ, and I've corralled them into whatever it is that I'm doing.
Like, what happened?
And it does work. I'm focusing on different areas at the minute, because I've kind of gone, oh, my approach doesn't work that way. So I just deliver something and say, right, how is it that you want to learn? How is it that you want to embed accessibility into your area? What would you do? And then to support them in that way.
Oh, I've just seen a fabulous one. Have you looked at assistive technology overlays for your online platform? I wouldn't let them with a mile of anything that we build. It's if literally our ethos is just don't break it in the first place, and you never even have to have that question. That's the problem. Is an accessible overlay means it's such a mess that you've got no other option, and so then you need to go back and go, why are we in this state that we would even have that conversation? There's something massively broken about the way that we're building things. Accessibility happens right at the start. There's a lovely little technique that we've used quite a few times. Actually, Jamie started it off. Is the beginning of every single project, write a list of who you are willing to exclude.
Yeah.
And actually get the whole team together and say, right, who are we willing to exclude before we start designing and building this thing? Let's put a list up there, and we'll put it. And it might be the fact that we're only supporting certain languages. The thing is geo-locked to the UK. There are audiences you can start identifying. We're not going to cover 240 pixel wide screens. I don't know. But there are audiences in there. And then when you make a decision, look back at the list and say, if it adds to that list, we don't do it that way. We have to find another solution to the thing that we're doing, because we're not adding to the list that we agreed in the first place. And so literally, that if you've got actively excluded a bunch of people, you're going to start talking about overlays.
Yeah.
Can I just question something about that, which is, I absolutely agree on overlays. Do you include things like widgets in that, where it's things that can help in terms of customization and stuff like that? Is there a distinction?
We start with what is in the operating system and the browser, and we support end user equipment. Start with what is delivered to the person. That's the so if you're building something for, it's going to be used on iOS platforms, you support what is available, because people will have set their device up and all the rest of it. So don't duplicate what is already provided in end user equipment in a widget. It's pointless, because people go all over the internet. They don't just go to your site. They will set that up, they'll go somewhere else. And if they've got stuff set up on their operating system, you've gone and overridden it or broken it or conflicted with it, and then it'll mess up their journey into another place. Start with end user equipment and then work back from that. I think there's a couple of instances where you can consider it. And there are a couple of times we tried building a thing called the Accessibility Toolkit, which was in iPlayer 1. And to be honest, it was an absolute nightmare to support. It confused the heck out of the users. And we just, this is when we realized the hard way that this is a really difficult thing to get right. And particularly, so it's still something that we think about, and building additional features in there, building stuff that does help and support people, but don't duplicate effort that's already provided by end user equipment.
I saw a couple of just similar questions about like change fatigue and how to get people kind of involved in accessibility from the very beginning. And I found a couple of kind of different methods seem to work. So I think having different ways of learning really helped for that fatigue. We would all be able to meet up with each other. We'd have sessions, have working groups where we could all be face to face. And then all of a sudden, everything's on Zoom and you're being bombarded with constant emails, newsletters, information all the time. So having those different ways of learning really helps. So doing a workshop where everyone gets involved and you've all got your screen, you're doing things at the same time as each other, having a presentation that's not just us speaking to you and it's very, very interactive, that helps with the fatigue. Making sure that you're keeping things really fresh all the time, even just articles that are interesting and can make you kind of go, oh yeah, that's a great idea. No kind of extra work involved, but just having a little look at how somebody's been innovative in different solutions. And I think also when it comes to senior leadership buy-in and people's buy-in, and the fact that some people kind of are a bit kind of apathetic to it, I think thinking about accessibility not just in a medical way, and thinking about it in a day-to-day, that it affects everybody. Gareth,
oh yeah, accessibility is environmental and situational. It's not medical.
It's not
as such.
It's not, and kind of going, okay, everybody in the room, how many people wear glasses, how many people have bigger font on their phone, how many people when you're on a Friday night and a Saturday night and it's getting a little bit blurry on your phone,
a few glasses of wine, I think.
A few glasses of wine later, and I need bigger font, or I need subtitles, or there's various different things, and not thinking about it, thinking it from a real human focused point of view. It's not just about people with any kind of disability. It's sometimes I'm 5'2" and well, I'm 5'1" and a bit, but if you put things really high up, 5'2" sounds better. If you put things really high up, I can't reach them, and so I need something to assist me in that way. You've disabled me as somebody that's purchasing something if you put it too high. So thinking about it where it actually involves everybody, and saying at some point it will affect you, so thinking about it early.
We all have accessibility issues, all of us, and it's that whole thing where we kind of think color contrast. For me, I always push this in the BBC. Color contrast has got nothing to do with vision impairment. It's got everything to do with battery life, because the one thing our users do when they want to extend their battery on their mobile devices is they turn the brightness of the screens down.
Exactly.
And as soon they are visually impairing themselves by choice, we need to support that user behavior by being high contrast in our interfaces. We drift away from that. We're just creating a problem for everyone.
Yeah.
And as Jamie likes to say as well, he's like, don't disable people. We take a very social model of this, view of this. We're not trying to add accessibility to anything. We're trying to stop bad decisions happening in the first place that actually disable people. It's accessibility
for everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody in the room.
Can I just answer Stuart? Stuart just asked, can you be an access lead without being a tech lead?
I think we're running out of time, Gareth.
Well, I just want to just say, Stuart, very quickly, me and Charlie. There you go. That's the end of your. That's the answer to your question. Yes.
That's brilliant. Thanks both. We have kind of run out of time. There's a few more questions in there. I think you've covered a fair few of them anyway during the talk. Brilliant. It kind of echoes what we're trying to do in government, hopefully across the rest of the public sector as well. And really welcome that. And it's great that you're sort of saying talk to other organisations. That's why we invited you in. We hope we can share, and hope others can share as well. brilliant, as ever, brilliant stuff from Gareth and Charlie. Really grateful to you, thankful to you for that, and I hope this conversation continues. And we're going to be working on this.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Thank you for inviting us. It's been great. It's been lovely.
And thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for joining. If you could feed the feedback form, that'd be great. And there's the link to the agenda in the chat as well. Thanks everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye.